welcome back to my channel. My name is Abby Zander and I post Bible study content for women here on YouTube. Right now we are doing a podcast series through the book of First Thessalonians. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, feel free to go to my channel and look at that. Some of you have been asking questions about the method that we're using for this study, the OIA method from Living by the Book. And so I just thought I would get on here and clarify, answer those questions, further explain the OIA method in detail. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm also going to be sharing some resources that I use when I study the Bible. So come tag along for the ride and let's get started. So, as I mentioned before, we are implementing a method called OIA in our study. I found this method from the Hendricks Living by the Book. I will have that linked down below in the description box in case you want to check them out. But for those of you who don't know, OIA stands for Observation, Interpretation, and Application. And I just love using this method just because it's clear, it's short, it's to the point. It's easy enough for someone who is a new believer who is just starting to study the Bible, but yet intricate enough to where someone who has been studying the Bible for a very long time will enjoy using it. So let's dive into the first phase in this method, and that is observation. Now, this phase is probably my favorite just because this is where the bulk of our research takes place. So the first thing you're going to want to do to start off your research is to pick out a passage. Now, ladies, pick out a passage, not a verse, and this is why a lot of people who pick out single verses to study often make the mistake of pulling it out of its context and making it mean something that the author did not intend for it to mean at all. And so it's really important to pick out a passage, pick out a verse that you might want to study, but also the verse before, afterwards, even start with like half a chapter or something. Just be sure to pick out a passage to start off your study. And in 2 Timothy 2:15, it says that we're to study the Bible accurately, and picking out a passage specifically is a part of that. So keep that in mind. Pick out a passage, not a verse. Secondly, you're going to want to read that passage with different translations. I love reading in different translations just because it allows me to see repeated words and phrases that I might not have caught on to if I would have just read from a single translation. It also helps me figure out changes of thought, things like that. And so I'm going to show you some translations that I use when I study the text. The first one is my New American Standard Bible. I have a keyword study Bible and I love using it just because it has Strong's, and I think it's the Vines dictionary in the back as well. I'm not entirely sure on that, so don't quote me on that. But I love it because it has the Strong's numbers corresponding to the words in the text, and so it's super easy to use. The next word for word translation that I've been using recently is the ESV, the English Standard Version. My husband has this study Bible that I just started using, and I enjoy that as well. I also have a King James Study Bible that I use, and then one that I just recently started using also is the Christian Standard Bible. This one that I have is specifically for journaling, so I like writing my Greek words in the side margins. Normally, I will try to do 5 to 6 different translations when I'm studying out a text. You guys don't have to go that far if you're just starting this method, but I would recommend at least 3 just to get a good grasp of the text. And after you read your passage in different translations, you're going to want to look at its context. Now, context is very important, and I'm going to touch on 3 specific contexts that you're going to want to use when you study. And the first is the historical and the geographical context. Now, oftentimes for this context, I will use Bible atlases, Bible handbooks, and also the introductions from certain commentaries. They will also have a historical context portion in there. And it's just important to ask, when was the book written? Where was the audience from? Where was the author from? What was his background? If the book specifically mentions a place, look up that place and see where it is on the map, maybe from that time. And then the next context you're going to want to study is the literary context. What kind of book is this? Is this a letter written from an apostle? Is it a narrative story from the Old Testament? Is it a book of poetry? And that's really important to ask just because you study genres differently. For example, you're not going to study the book of Ephesians, which is a letter from Paul, the same way that you would the book of Joshua in the Old Testament. They're both written from different time periods. They both have different genres, different languages, things like that. So be sure to ask what the literary context is. And then lastly, you're going to want to put your passage within the context of the Bible as a whole. And what I use for this is a concordance. Normally, if I have my keywords highlighted, which we're going to talk about next, I will take those and put those in the concordance just to make sure that I'm interpreting this passage in light of the Bible as a whole. Lastly, as I mentioned beforehand, make sure you highlight words that stand out to you. These could be what you see as keywords, the main words in the passage. Normally for me, it's a verb or an action word because that's really easy to pull out. I will also highlight things that indicate transitions, like prepositions in, for. Those normally indicate a change of thought within the text. I'll also highlight modifiers and or. Those normally indicate things that are being compared or contrasted. After you've fully observed the text, you can move on to the next phase, which is interpretation. Now, I feel like there are two types of people who interpret the Bible. The first one was like me. I was really afraid to ask, what does the text mean? Just because I felt like I didn't have all the answers. And then there are others who rush from the observation phase just to get to what does the text mean, the interpretation phase. If you're like me, I just want to encourage you that you're not going to have all the answers. As long as you've observed the text to the best of your ability and with the help of the Holy Spirit, you should have no reason to be afraid of asking what does the text mean. And if you're not really sure, go back and do some more observation. But if you're one to rush the observation just to get to the interpretation phase, please don't do that. Please take your time in the observation phase because we want to interpret the Bible accurately. If you remember those words that we highlighted, it could be verbs, keywords that you thought were good to study, transitions, things like that. You're going to take those and do a word study. Word studies are really, really important because it helps us identify what those words meant in their original languages. And you guys probably already know this, but the Bible was written in three different languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Hebrew and Aramaic comprise the Old Testament, and Greek comprise the New Testament. And so, again, these word studies are important because we want to find out what the author was meaning in the original language that it was written. I have a website that I want to show you. It's called Blue Letter Bible. And let me actually go back to the homepage. I want to show you, this is a very well-known website. A lot of my Bible college friends use this. But if you guys don't know what this website is, I'm just going to show you how to use it here real quick. This is so helpful for my word studies. That way I don't have books spread all over my table. I can just find everything that I need here with one click away on this website. So in this search queue here, you can put a verse that you want to study or even a word that you want to find in the Bible. For example's sake, I'm going to put 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 verse 6. And then down here, you can pick which translation you want to view it in. They have the King James Version, the English Standard Version, CSB. I hear they came out with this NASB 20 recently. I haven't researched that a lot yet, so I don't really know what I think about it, but I guess they have it here on Blue Letter Bible. And then they also have the NASB 95. Now, for studying purposes, I'm going to choose the NASB. And I'm going to search our verse there, and there it is. It comes up with the verse, 1 Thessalonians 1:6. And for example's sake, we're going to study this word imitators. And so if you go to your tools bar here on the left, you're going to click the interlinear tab. And that's where you find your Greek lexicon, where you're going to do your word study. And so right down here, they have the English translation that we read. In the middle bar, they have the Strong's number associated with the Greek word. And then over to the right here, they have the Greek word itself. So I'm just going to go down and find imitators and click on that Strong's number. And it takes me right to that entry there. See, we have our Greek word, and you can even hear it pronounced. That way, if you want to reference it later, you don't mess up the sound of it. It also says what part of speech it is, which is very helpful if you're studying the literary context. And if you go down, they also have Vine's dictionary, which I love. If you click that, you can read that, and they also have some pretty good cross references in the Vine's dictionary as well. And then if you go down further, you get your Strong's definition, and there they have more dictionary definitions as well for that. And right down at the bottom, if you were looking for concordance results, they have that as well, which can be very helpful. And so, yeah, I just wanted to show you that. It's a good reference for me when I do my word studies. Again, that way I don't have to have all the books on my table. But always remember to compare your word studies to the context of the Bible as a whole, which is why these concordance results, the cross references, to me are very important when you're studying. And so just remember when you're interpreting the Bible, sometimes the author will clearly state the meaning of what he's trying to say in the text. And so if he does that, don't overthink it. Don't try to put your own interpretation into the text. And if that's what he says, that's what he means. This last phase that we're going to be talking about is really important because Bible study is really about two things. You could probably add more to these two things that I'm going to say, but in my own personal experience, I've narrowed Bible study down to two things. The first is knowing more about God. And then the second is, how does the Bible transform my life? Because it's not all about the knowledge. It's about how it applies to my life. And so this last phase is application. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you just one tip that I've learned in applying the Bible. I used to be a very lazy Bible studier. I would observe and interpret, but when I would get to application, I was done. Just remember when you're looking to finally apply the text, apply it specifically and practically. For example, you guys are very familiar with this verse in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. It's very simple. It says to pray without ceasing. And it's not enough just to come away from the text with, oh, yeah, I should pray every day, or I should pray all the time when I think about it. Get specific with it. Ask, do I need to come up with a certain time, whether it's in the morning or the evening, to where I can just pray? Or keep a prayer journal and just note in it every day certain praises, certain prayer requests. Even if it's not a specific time, what I do sometimes, I'll be up a little bit in the morning, probably not out of bed, but just awake, and I'll lay there before I get up and just pray. It doesn't have to even be long. It could be 5 minutes or however long you want, but just get specific with it. And also, again, be practical. Don't shove too many things on your plate when it comes to application. I mean, if you do feel convicted to do something in regards to application and applying the Bible, please feel free to do so. But again, just make sure that you are practically applying it as well. So I hope this has clarified some things for you guys, especially for those who have been doing the podcast session study. Even for those of you who haven't been doing the podcast, it's a great Bible study method anyways, so feel free to implement this in your own personal Bible study. But thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a good day.